The village of Umuofia lay quiet under the long heavy rains that had settled in for months. Red earth paths stayed slick, compounds turned damp, and the air carried the constant scent of wet leaves, charcoal smoke, and faintly roasting plantain from distant fires. At the edge of the settlement, Elder Okoro's mud brick hut stood half swallowed by overgrown cassava and drooping banana leaves. Everyone knew the story. After his wife passed years earlier, a curse had stolen first her breath, then his hearing, and finally his strength. He moved slowly now, leaning on a carved walking stick, cupping one ear when adults spoke, answering only in low mumbles that the wind carried away. Tradition took care of such elders. Young girls from the inner compounds carried food. Along the narrow path, bowls of steaming jollof rice wrapped in foil gari, soaked in rich palm oil soup, sometimes a small mound of fried akara. They delivered quickly, respectfully, and left before the evening shadows stretched too far. Amara was 10, her tight cornrows decorated with tiny red beads her mother had threaded in earlier that morning. She liked the short journey, the women chatting and laughing by the stream, the tinny high-life music leaking from a neighbor's small radio, the challenge of balancing the heavy enamel bowl without spilling a drop. Lately though, the path felt different. Longer. The air thicker. Today she carried pepper soup, sharp with uziza leaves and ground Cameroon pepper, steam rising in lazy curls against the humid dusk. She tapped lightly on the doorframe. A pause, then the familiar rasp, "Enter my daughter." Amara stepped inside. A single kerosene lamp burned on a low stool, casting unsteady shadows across walls patched with yellowed newspaper. Elder Okoro sat, cross-legged on his mat, stick resting across his thin knees, a faint smile folding his face. "Place it there," he said, nodding toward the corner. His voice came clear, too clear for a man who never heard properly. Amara's heart gave a quick, startled jump. She set the calabash down carefully, the plastic lid clicking against the rim, and turned to go. "Wait." One hand lifted, fingers curling. "Take a sweet. For your kindness." A small, rusted tin waited beside him, half filled with wrapped candies that caught the lamplight like bright coins. She hesitated, then reached for one. Sugar melted sweet and strange on her tongue. His gaze followed her, sharp and steady in the dim room. "Sit. A little," he murmured. "Tell me about school." Amara balanced on the edge of the stool, knees pressed tight. He asked about her lessons, her friends, but his palm settled on her thigh, warm, deliberate, inching higher. Her breath snagged in her throat. "I have to go, sir. Mama is waiting." His fingers tightened. "No rush. The ancestors reward those who care for the old." The hut seemed to shrink around her. The lamp hissed softly. Outside, a distant rooster crowed once. Amara remembered Adeora's quiet warning days earlier. "Don't stay long. He touches." She had laughed it off then. Now cold fear twisted in her belly. "Please," she whispered. He leaned closer, breath sour with old palm wine. "Hush, child. No one hears. I'm deaf, remember." Amara shoved with sudden force. The calabash tipped, dark soup splashing across the earthen floor like spilled blood. She darted through the doorway, bare feet slapping wet mud, running until she reached the big mango tree outside her compound. There, under dripping leaves, she sank down and cried, deep, silent sobs that no one else could hear. From the shadows of the next yard, Adora watched, clutching her own empty bowl, eyes wide with the fear she had already learned to carry alone. In the months that followed, the rains refused to ease. Compounds stayed sodden, paths remained treacherous ribbons of red mud, and the village moved slower under the weight of endless gray skies. Amara changed quietly at first. No more singing while she swept the yard, no more racing after the neighbor's goats with the other children. She kept her legs pressed tightly together even when perched on the low kitchen stool to peel yam, as though guarding something fragile. One humid afternoon, while mother and daughter pounded fufu side by side in the open kitchen, Amara's pestle slipped from her grip. The heavy wooden thud rang out too sharply against the steady drip from the thatch overhead. Tears came, without sound. "Mama," she whispered, voice almost lost beneath the patter of rain. Nena stopped, mortar balanced against her hip. She studied her daughter's face, the tight mouth, the downcast eyes, and felt something cold settle in her chest. "What is it, my heart?" The words spilled in pieces, the dim hut, the offered sweet, the hand that lingered too long on her thigh, the low promise that no one hears because I'm deaf. Each fragment struck Nena like stones dropped into still water. She set the pestle down with careful slowness, wiped her palms on her wrapper, and drew Amara into her arms. The girl trembled against her, small and fierce all at once. That same evening, beneath the broad mango tree whose leaves still dripped from an earlier downpour, Nena repeated every word to Emeka. The air hung thick with the scent of wet earth and ripening fruit. Emeka listened without interrupting, arms folded across his chest, jaw locked. When she finished, he rose abruptly. His machete leaned against the trunk, catching the last weak light. "That old snake," he said quietly. "All these years pretending." "Not only Amara," Nena continued, voice low. "Adora too. And perhaps others. The girls take food to him every week. Every single week." Emeka's breath hissed out. He paced beneath the tree, boots sinking into soft mud. For a long moment Nena thought he would stride down the path to the hut right then, blade in hand. Instead he halted, gaze fixed on the shadowed trail that led to Elder Okoro's compound. "We speak to the families first," he decided. Quietly. "No one else must know until we are certain." Over the following weeks, suspicion spread like fine harmattan dust, soft, persistent, impossible to brush away. Adora's mother, Ngozi, admitted her daughter now woke crying from nightmares and barely touched food. Little Kayamaka from the next compound refused to walk the path alone anymore. She insisted her older brother wait at the gate. At the stream, in church pews, around market stalls, parents exchanged quick glances whenever the old man's name drifted near. Elder Okoro felt the shift. Fewer bowls appeared at his threshold. When they did, the girls dropped them quickly and ran before he could speak. He sat longer in his doorway, stick tapping the ground, eyes scanning the path with a clarity no longer veiled by feigned frailty. One evening, as distant thunder rolled, Amara sat close to her mother on the veranda. Nena braided her daughter's hair with slow, steady fingers. "Soon," she murmured into the growing dark. "Soon we will drive this shadow away." Amara nodded once, small and resolute. Outside, the rain began again, gentle at first, then fierce, washing the earth while the village waited. The new Yam Festival arrived sooner than expected, breaking the long grip of rain with sudden sun and the sharp crack of drums. Umuofia stirred to life. Compounds filled with the smell of roasted yam, goat stew bubbling over open fires, and women in bright wrappers dancing to the rhythm of ojin gongs. Masquerades, tall figures draped in raffia and cowrie shells, faces carved from wood, strode through the village square, whips cracking the air to chase laughing children in playful terror. Elder Okoro appeared at the edge of the crowd, leaning heavily on his stick, head tilted as though straining to catch the music he claimed he could not hear. Villagers nodded politely, some pressing a small piece of yam or a cup of palm wine into his hand out of lingering pity. He accepted with a weak smile, eyes scanning the throng of children weaving between legs and stalls. Amara stayed close to her mother that afternoon, helping carry trays of fried plantain to the family's shaded spot under the iroko tree. She kept glancing toward the old man, stomach tight. Adora found her there, slipping through the crowd with a small calabash of water balanced on her head. "He's watching," Adora whispered, eyes darting. "I saw him near the palm grove earlier." Amara swallowed. "We should tell someone." "Not yet," Adora said quickly. "They'll say we're lying. Or that we imagined it." As dusk fell, the masquerades grew wilder. Torches flickered, casting long, jumping shadows. The drums pounded faster, urging bodies to move. Elder Okoro drifted away from the main square, stick tapping a slow path toward the quieter edges where the palm trees stood thick. He paused near a cluster of girls, fetching water from the stream, murmuring something low. One girl laughed nervously and hurried off. Another, little Ifioma, hesitated. Amara saw it happen. She tugged Nena's wrapper. Mama, look. Nena followed her gaze. Elder Okoro had stepped closer to Ifioma, hand outstretched, as though offering a coin. The girl froze. Then a masquerade burst from the trees, bells jingling, raffia swirling, chasing a group of boys in mock pursuit. The tall figure spun, whip cracking inches from the ground. Ifioma squealed and ran toward the crowd. Elder Okoro straightened abruptly. For a heartbeat his posture lost its frailty. He turned sharply toward the sound of the bells, head snapping in perfect direction. Amara's breath caught. He had heard clearly, instinctively. Nena's hand tightened on her daughter's shoulder. Stay here, she said, voice low and hard. She moved through the dancers, eyes fixed on the old man. He sensed her approach and shuffled back toward his usual spot, stick tapping faster now, the mask of weakness slipping back into place. Later, when the fires burned low and the drums softened to a murmur, Amara sat beside Adora on a log near the edge of the square. The two girls watched the last masquerades retreat into the night. He isn't deaf, Amara whispered. Adora nodded slowly. I've known for a while. But who will believe children against an elder? Above them, the moon hung bright and cold. Somewhere in the distance, a single drumbeat lingered, steady, insistent, like a warning no one yet understood. In the weeks after the festival, the village carried on with its quiet routines, but an undercurrent of unease had taken root. The sun returned fully now, drying the paths to cracked red dust and coaxing green shoots from yam mounds. Yet conversations hushed whenever Elder Okoro's name drifted near. Fewer children walked the path to his hut. When food arrived at all, it came in hurried drops at the threshold, no more lingering smiles or polite greetings. Amara stopped sleeping through the night. She woke sweating, the memory of that sour palm wine breath pressing against her dreams. Nena watched her daughter closely, braiding her hair tighter each morning as though the beads could hold her fears in place. Emeka spoke less, his machete always within reach, propped against the veranda post like a silent promise. One sticky afternoon, while Nena pounded spices in the mortar, Amara sat on the low stool beside her, knees drawn up. The pestle's rhythm filled the silence, until Amara's voice cut through it, small but steady. Mama, it wasn't just once. Nena's hand paused mid-air. She set the pestle down slowly, turned fully to face her. Daughter, tell me everything, my heart. No more hiding. The words poured out then, halting at first, then faster. The sweets that made her head swim. The way the lamp flickered while his hands moved where they shouldn't. The whispered threats of ancestral curses if she spoke. How he laughed softly when she cried, saying the ancestors forgave elders who took what was offered in kindness. Amara's voice cracked on the last part, but she kept going until every detail lay bare between them. Nena listened without interrupting, her face carved from stone. When Amara finished, tears streaking her cheeks, Nena pulled her close, rocking her gently as though she was still a baby. Then she stood, wiped her hands on her wrapper, and walked to the door. Stay here, she said. I'm fetching your father. Emeka was in the yard sharpening his hoe when Nena found him. She repeated every word Amara had said, voice low and unyielding. Emeka's sharpening stone stilled. His shoulders rose and fell once deeply. When he looked up, his eyes burned. That man has poisoned our children, he said. Enough. That evening, under the mango tree as the sky turned the color of bruised mangoes. Emeka gathered Ngozi, Adarora's mother, and 2 other parents whose daughters had carried food to the old man. They spoke in hushed tones, lanterns casting long shadows across their faces. Adarora's story matched Amara's in every painful detail. Kayamika's mother admitted her girl had come home with bruises on her arms once, claiming she fell, but now the truth stared back at them all. We go to the council tomorrow at dawn, Emeka decided, before he slips away or pretends innocence again. Ngozi nodded, tears shining in the lamplight. And if the elders hesitate? Emeka's hand rested on the machete at his side. Then we handle it ourselves. No more shadows in our homes. As the meeting broke, Amara slipped out to the veranda. She watched the adults disperse into the night, their footsteps soft on the dry earth. For the first time in months, a small spark of something like hope flickered in her chest, not bright, not steady, but there. Inside. Nena lit an extra lamp and sat beside her daughter. Tomorrow, she whispered, this ends. Outside. Crickets sang into the warm darkness, oblivious to the storm gathering beneath the village's calm surface. Dawn broke pale and cool over Umuofia, the first light filtering through thin mist that clung to the yam mounds and banana groves. Emeka rose before the cocks finished crowing. He moved quietly through the compound, waking the men he had spoken to the night before. Ngozi's husband joined them, along with Kayamika's father and 2 others, strong, silent farmers whose faces carried the same hard resolve. They carried no weapons openly, but machetes rested in belts and thick walking sticks filled their hands. They walked the narrow path in single file, boots stirring faint dust now that the rains had finally eased. No one spoke. The only sounds were the soft slap of feet on earth and the distant call of a village bird welcoming morning. Elder Okoro's hut appeared ahead, still shadowed by the tall cassava plants. Smoke curled lazily from the small fire pit outside. He must have risen early too. The men fanned out without a word. Emeka stepped forward and struck the doorframe 3 times with his stick, sharp, deliberate knocks that echoed through the quiet compound. The door creaked open. Elder Okoro stood there, stick in hand, wrapper tied loosely around his thin frame. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before the familiar mask of confusion slid back into place. What brings you so early, my sons? He rasped, cupping one ear as though struggling to hear. Emeka's voice came low and steady. We know what you've done. The old man blinked slowly. I don't understand. My ears. Your ears hear perfectly, Ngozi's husband cut in, stepping beside Emeka. We have the words of the children. All of them. Elder Okoro's hand tightened on his stick. For a moment he said nothing. Then, softly, children imagine things. They play games. Perhaps they fell, bruised, themselves. Kayamika's father lunged forward, shoving the door wide. Enough lies. Inside. The kerosene lamp still burned low on its stool. On the mat lay a small pile of wrapped sweets, a torn piece of children's wrapper peeking from beneath the folded blanket. Emeka's gaze locked on it. He stepped inside, picked up the fabric, held it up. The men behind him murmured darkly. Elder Okoro backed away, stick raised as though to ward off spirits. This is misunderstanding. I am an old man, weak. Emeka moved faster than anyone expected. His hand shot out, gripping the old man's wrist. He twisted just enough to make the stick clatter to the floor. You heard the masquerade drums at the festival. You turned toward the bells without hesitation. You are not deaf. You never were. The old man's face crumpled, not in fear, but in something closer to resignation. His shoulders sagged. When he spoke again, his voice lost its rasp, clear and ordinary. I was lonely, he said quietly. After my wife, the silence was too much. Emeka's grip did not loosen. You took their innocence to fill it. The men closed in. Rough hands seized his arms. Elder Okoro did not resist as they pulled him outside into the growing light. A few early risers paused on distant paths, watching the procession form, old man in the center, surrounded by grim-faced fathers. They marched him to the village square beneath the ancient iroko tree, where the council would soon gather. Word spread quickly, women emerged from compounds, children trailing behind, whispers rising like morning mist. Emeka looked back once at the hut, now standing empty and small in the sunlight. Then he turned forward again, steps firm on the red earth. The reckoning had begun. By mid-morning the village square had filled. Word traveled faster than market gossip. The fathers had taken Elder Okoro. Women left their grinding stones, men set down hoes, children trailed behind in wide-eyed silence. The ancient iroko tree stood at the center like a silent judge, its massive trunk scarred by decades of meetings, its branches spreading wide enough to shade half the gathering. Benches of rough-hewn wood had been dragged into a rough circle. The council elders already sat in their places, Agbada robes crisp despite the rising heat. Chief Yuzo presided, gray hair cropped close, face lined with the weight of years spent settling disputes. He raised one hand for quiet as Emeka and the others pushed Elder Okoro forward. The old man stumbled once on the uneven ground but caught himself. No longer did he lean heavily on the stick, someone had taken it from him during the march. His wrapper hung loose on his thin frame, and sweat glistened on his forehead, though whether from fear or the sun no one could say. Speak. Chief Yuzo commanded. His voice carried without effort. What is this matter? That brings us together before the day's work is half done. Emeka stepped forward first. His voice was steady, though his hands clenched at his sides. This man, Elder Okoro, has defiled our daughters. 4 months, perhaps. Longer. He pretended deafness and frailty so the village would send children to carry food to his hut. There, alone with them, he touched them in ways no elder should. He threatened them with curses if they spoke. We have the words of Amara, Adora, Kayamaka, and others. Their stories match. We found evidence in his hut, torn pieces of their wrappers, sweets he used to lure them. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several women pressed hands to their mouths, a few fathers shifted, knuckles whitening around their sticks. Chief Yuzo turned to Elder Okoro. Do you deny this? The old man lifted his head slowly. For the first time in years his voice came clear, unrasped, unfeigned. I do not deny it. A gasp swept the square. I was alone. After my wife died the silence grew too heavy. The children, they were kind. They came willingly at first. Willingly. Ngozi surged forward, eyes blazing. My Adora is 10 years old. She came because the village taught her to honor elders. You betrayed that trust. Elder Okoro's gaze dropped to the red earth. I know what I did was wrong. But prison, the white man's prison will kill me slowly. My family will come. They will pay for whatever healing the girls need, medicine, school fees, rituals. With the Dibia, let me stay in my hut, isolated. Let the village shun me. But do not send me away in chains. Chief Yuzo leaned forward. The council will hear from the families. One by one the parents spoke. Nena described Amara's nightmares, the way she flinched at sudden touches. Ngozi told of Adora's refusal to eat, her silent weeping at night. Kayamaka's mother held up a small bracelet the girl had once worn proudly, now broken, found discarded near the old man's mat. Each testimony deepened the silence until the square felt heavy with it. When the last mother finished, Chief Yuzo consulted quietly with the other elders. Proverbs passed between them in low tones. He who digs a pit for another falls into it himself. The river that forgets its source will dry up. After long minutes he raised his hand again. The Council has decided, he announced. Elder Okoro, you will not go to the police station in Onitsha. Prison would bring shame to the entire village and perhaps no true justice. Instead, you will remain in your hut. No one will bring you food. No one will visit. No one will speak your name in greeting. You will live as the shadow you have become, alone until the ancestors call you. If any of your kin wish to bring you sustenance, they may do so in secret, but they will carry the same shame. A low rumble of approval rose from the crowd. Some nodded, others looked away. Conflicted. Emeka spoke last. And the girls? What of their healing? The families of Okoro will pay for treatment, Chief Yuzo replied. Adibia will cleanse them of any spiritual harm. The clinic in town will see to their bodies. The village will watch over them. No child will walk that path alone. Again. Elder Okoro was led away then, not roughly but firmly. The crowd parted as he passed. Eyes averted, whispers trailing him like smoke. He did not look back. As the square emptied, Nena found Amara waiting beneath the mango tree. The girl's face was tear-streaked but calm. Nena knelt, cupped her daughter's cheeks. It is over, she said softly. The shadow is gone. Amara nodded once. For the first time in months, she did not flinch when her mother pulled her close. High above, the iroko's leaves rustled in a sudden breeze, as though the old tree itself had exhaled. The village turned back to its work, yam mounds to tend, fires to light, children to call home. But something had shifted beneath the surface. Trust, once given freely, would now carry a quiet caution. And in the empty hut at the edge of Umuofia, an old man sat alone in the gathering dusk, listening to the silence he had once feared, and now could never escape. The months that followed the council meeting settled over Umuofia like a heavy blanket. The harmattan winds arrived early that year, carrying fine red dust that coated roofs, windowsills, and the edges of every conversation. The village moved forward in small, deliberate ways, yam harvested and stored, children returning to school with new uniforms, women gathering at the stream with buckets balanced on their heads, but something unspoken lingered in the air. Trust, once given as freely as morning greetings, now carried a careful pause. Elder Okoro's hut stood untouched at the edge of the village. No one approached it anymore. The cassava plants grew wilder, their broad leaves curling over the path until the doorway was nearly hidden. Occasionally a distant relative arrived from Onitsha or Awka, quiet men in city shirts who carried small sacks of gari or beans, but they came at night, left the food at the threshold, without knocking, and disappeared before dawn. The village pretended not to notice. The agreement had been clear: isolation, not death by starvation. Inside the hut, Elder Okoro lived in a shrinking world. The kerosene lamp burned less, often to save fuel. He ate sparingly, rationing what little arrived. His once sharp eyes dulled, the pretense of frailty had become reality. He sat most days on the same bamboo mat, back against the wall, listening to sounds he could no longer pretend to miss, the laughter of children playing far off, the high-life music drifting from radios, the evening call of crickets. The silence he had once feared now pressed in from every side, thick and unyielding. Amara began to heal slowly. Nightmares still came, but less often. Nena took her to the dibia 3 times, rituals of herbs, incantations, and white chalk marks on her forehead to drive away any lingering spirit of harm. At the clinic in town, a kind nurse examined her gently, prescribed medicine for the pain that sometimes returned, and spoke softly about time being the best healer. Amara returned to school, sat beside Adora again, and little by little the 2 girls found ways to laugh, first in whispers, then louder, until the sound reached their mother's ears like music. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the compounds gold, Amara and Adora walked together to the stream. They no longer carried food bowls. Instead they balanced small buckets for water, giggling when the surface rippled and caught their reflections. Adora splashed Amara lightly. Amara retaliated with a handful of cool water. For a moment the shadow lifted. Entirely. At home, Nena watched from the veranda. She smiled, small, tired but real, and turned to Emeka, who was repairing a broken yam steak nearby. "They're playing again," she said quietly. Emeka paused, looked toward the stream. His shoulders, so tight for so long, eased a fraction. "Good," he murmured. "Let them play." Emeka himself carried the weight longer than most. He patrolled the paths sometimes. At dusk, machete at his side, not for vengeance, but to make sure no other elder ever sat too long watching children pass. He spoke little of that morning under the iroko, but when other fathers asked, he only said, "We did what fathers must do." Seasons turned again. Another rainy season came and went. The harmattan returned. Sharper this time. Elder Okoro grew thinner. His relatives visited less frequently. The sacks left at the door grew smaller, then stopped altogether. No one knew exactly when the last one came, perhaps during a heavy rain when no one ventured out. The village did not ask. One stormy evening, lightning split the sky above Umuofia. Thunder rolled long and low, shaking the thatch roofs. Rain hammered the earth in sheets, turning paths to rivers once more. Inside his hut, Elder Okoro lay on the mat, too weak to rise. The lamp had gone out days earlier. He no longer bothered to light it. He listened to the storm, truly listened, and for the first time in years felt no need to pretend. The wind howled through cracks in the walls. Rain leaked steadily onto the floor near his feet. He thought of his wife, of the children he had hurt, of the loneliness he had chosen over asking for help. A single tear traced down his cheek, lost in the dampness. By morning the storm had passed. The sky cleared to a pale, washed blue. A group of boys chasing a stray goat wandered closer to the hut than anyone had in months. One peered through the overgrown cassava, curious. "Papa, there's someone inside," he called. The father approached cautiously, pushed the sagging door wider. Elder Okoro lay still, eyes open to the ceiling, hands folded across his thin chest. No breath moved him. The smell of damp earth and decay hung in the small space. Word spread quietly, no shouts, no gathering crowds. A few men came, wrapped the body in an old mat, carried it to the edge of the village farmland where outcasts were sometimes buried. No drums sounded. No women wailed. They dug a shallow grave beneath a lone palm tree, covered it with red earth, and walked away, without looking back. Days later, Amara and Adora sat under the mango tree in the late afternoon light. Amara traced patterns in the dust with a stick. Adora braided a few strands of her friend's hair. "Do you think he's gone forever?" Amara asked softly. Adora nodded. "He's gone. And we're still here." They sat in silence a while longer, listening to the village sounds, children calling, a radio playing high life, the distant thud of pestles pounding fufu. The shadow that had once stretched so long across their lives had finally shrunk to nothing. Nena called them in for supper. The girls rose, brushed dust from their wrappers, and walked home hand in hand. Above them, the mango leaves rustled gently in the evening breeze, and the sky turned the soft orange of promise. In Umuofia, life continued, wounds scarred over, lessons carried forward, children allowed to play again without fear. And somewhere beneath the red earth, an old man rested in silence at last.